Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're not just doing a surface-level chat about health. We are going on a mission to reveal the hidden operating system that literally governs human life. We're going to decode the invisible biological forces that shape your energy, your sleep, your emotional resilience, and even your longevity. This is all about understanding the deep, interconnected systems of your body. We'll see how a single, simple physiological action dictates your brain's chemistry, which then dictates your autonomic nervous system, ultimately shaping the trajectory of your entire life. Prepare to discover the manual override for your own biology.
Picture this. It's 3 a.m. You are absolutely exhausted. Your eyes are heavy, your body is just begging for rest, and yet, your mind is racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. You're probably doing that mental math, right? Calculating exactly how few hours of sleep you're going to get if you just fall asleep right this second. So why does sleep feel completely impossible exactly when you need it the absolute most? We usually treat this frustration as a mental failing, like it's a sign that we just can't turn our brains off. But what if I told you this isn't a psychological weakness at all? It's a biological mystery waiting to be decoded. Every symptom is a clue, and your inability to sleep is a massive signal from your nervous system.
Okay, let's dive into this. That agonizing paradox you're experiencing, clinically, it's known as being tired but wired. And what you're really looking at is a state of chronic sympathetic hyperarousal. Basically, you have an epidemic of autonomic dysregulation happening inside you. Your sympathetic nervous system, that's your fight-or-flight response, is hyperactivated, while your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest system, is essentially offline. Your body is physically locked into a stress response. Your heart rate is elevated, your blood pressure is up, and the systemic muscular tension is actively blocking the biological transition into deep rest.
Which brings us to phase 1, the illusion of rest.
You know, in modern society, our go-to solution for exhaustion is usually a prescription sedative. We literally knock ourselves unconscious. But here's the thing. That completely disrupts true restorative rest. It treats a symptom by just shutting the whole system down. Instead, we really need to embrace this profound realization from the Buteyko Clinic. Sleep is not something you force. It happens when your body feels calm and balanced. You literally cannot command your brain to sleep. Sleep is a natural consequence of specific physiological conditions. Our only real option is to manually shift those internal conditions to invite sleep in. If your breathing is shallow, fast, or irregular, your brain stays on high alert. We have to find the biological lever that shifts the nervous system from a fight-or-flight state to a restful state.
So, how do we find that biological lever? Let's move into phase 2, the brain's hidden pacemaker. We're going to zoom way down deep into the microscopic neurobiology at the base of your brainstem. Right there, we find something called the pre-Botzinger complex. Now, for centuries, yogis knew that slow breathing brought tranquility, but it was researchers at Stanford and UCLA who finally decoded the actual cellular mechanism. This tiny cluster of neurons doesn't just manage your breathing rhythm, it actually acts like a highly trained internal spy. It constantly monitors the pace and type of your breath, whether you're sighing, gasping, or breathing slowly. And it reports that data directly to the arousal centers of your brain.
And that brings us to this absolutely staggering number, 175. Think about this. Out of the billions and billions of cells inside your brain, researchers identified a highly specific subpopulation of exactly 175 neurons inside this complex. They're characterized by the co-expression of CDH9 and DBX1 if you want to get technical. But the crazy part is, these 175 neurons are the ultimate physical switch between a state of sheer panic and profound calm. They don't generate the breathing rhythm themselves. Instead, they project directly to a brain center called the locus coeruleus, which is the engine that drives wakefulness, vigilance, and anxiety.
And this brilliantly illustrates the profound consequence of that connection. When you take rapid, shallow chest breaths, those 175 neurons fire off like crazy. They actively stimulate the locus coeruleus, which floods your brain with noradrenaline. That is what drives that wired, hyper-aroused feeling and somatic anxiety. But, and here's the secret, when you voluntarily slow your breathing down, you actively suppress the firing rate of those projection neurons. You literally quiet the ascending noradrenaline drive. Simultaneously, slow breathing activates the vagus nerve, which commands the release of acetylcholine, totally shutting down panic and turning on your parasympathetic nervous system.
Now that we've found the neurological switch, we can actually start pulling the levers. Welcome to phase 3, hacking the vagus nerve.
So, the vagus nerve.
This is the absolute superhighway of your parasympathetic nervous system, and the biomechanical reality here is just astonishing. It controls emotional regulation, social engagement, your heart rhythm, the whole shebang. When you practice slow nasal breathing that really engages your diaphragm, belly breathing, you aren't just moving air around. The diaphragm is physically connected to the vagus nerve and the heart. Deep diaphragmatic movements effectively massage the heart from within. By training your diaphragm to open your lungs fully, you improve oxygenation and physically stimulate the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway, drastically reducing systemic tension.
So the crucial point in all of this biology, the real magic actually happens on the exhale. Your heart rate and your breathing are physically tethered together through cardiorespiratory synchronization. When you inhale, your heart rate naturally ticks up just a bit. But when you exhale, bam, the vagus nerve activates. You have to realize you don't exhale just to relax. You exhale to literally secrete a chemical, acetylcholine, that physically dilates your blood vessels and commands your heart rate to decelerate. This increases your heart rate variability, or HRV, which is a prime indicator of a highly adaptable, resilient, and deeply relaxed nervous system.
But wait, we have to look at the chemistry of the exhale too. When you breathe slower, carbon dioxide builds up just a tiny bit in your blood. Now, I know we usually think of CO2 as just a waste gas, right? Like exhaust, but it is actually a vital signaling molecule. It's totally counterintuitive, but a slight buildup of CO2 is exactly what makes the vagus nerve more sensitive. It slows the pulse and dilates blood vessels, which actually improves blood flow to the brain. Low CO2, which is often caused by mouth breathing and hyperventilating, is actually known to trigger panic attacks. Furthermore, nasal breathing produces nitric oxide, which keeps your airways wide open.
We've uncovered the mechanisms, and the deeper mechanisms right beneath them. So let's put it into practice in Phase 4, the Human Operating Manual.
How do we actually translate these microscopic mechanisms into a literal steering wheel for the human body? Well, if you're lying in bed, you're exhausted, but your mind is racing, what exactly do you do to shift gears? Let's start with a highly structured, battle-tested protocol, box breathing. This is the exact rhythmic tool used by Navy SEALs, elite athletes, and high-stress professionals. You inhale slowly for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold again for 4. Because all 4 parts have equal timing, it gives your racing mind a highly repetitive job to focus on, distracting it from spiraling thoughts. Biologically, it lowers blood pressure and drops cortisol, your body's primary stress hormone, effectively slamming the brakes on your sympathetic nervous system.
Another incredibly powerful framework is the Buteyko method. This one is all about repairing dysfunctional breathing right at the source. It operates on 3 main dimensions, and they're simple but profound. First, breathe light. That corrects overbreathing and restores that crucial oxygen and CO2 balance we just talked about. Second, breathe slow. That's what activates your parasympathetic state. And third, breathe deep, which means engaging the diaphragm through full-time nasal breathing. By applying these principles, you literally transform fragile, easily disrupted sleep into deep restorative recovery, because you're actively building the optimal internal physiological conditions for sleep to occur naturally. Now, what's really interesting about this data is how we know which method works best. Researchers at Stanford actually put these interventions to the test in a randomized controlled study. They wanted to see if breathing practices with different inhale to exhale ratios had different effects. So they pitted 5 minutes of daily cyclic sighing, which heavily emphasizes prolonged exhalations, against box breathing and traditional mindfulness meditation. And guess what? The exhale-focused cyclic sighing mathematically outperformed traditional meditation across the board. It provided the highest mood improvement and the highest reduction in resting respiratory rate. It literally proves that emphasizing the exhale is the absolute most powerful way to actively hack your central autonomic network. So taking all this in, what is the ultimate biological gear for your body? Well, clinical research across a massive variety of studies points to this exact sweet spot: an optimal pace of about 5.5 to 6 breaths per minute. Right at this specific pace, you achieve maximum vagal tone and peak heart rate variability. You are spending way more time in the exhalation phase, secreting more acetylcholine, giving your heart more time to fill with blood in its slow phase, and perfectly optimizing your gaseous homeostasis. This pace is literally the frequency of deep human restoration.
We have journeyed from the existential frustration of a 3 a.m. sleepless night, all the way down to a microscopic cluster of 175 neurons in your brainstem, and then back out to the rhythmic, biomechanical expansion of your diaphragm. The massive takeaway here? You are not a victim of a racing mind. You are the pilot of a highly advanced biological machine, and the steering wheel is your breath. By controlling your respiration, you literally control your neurobiology, your arousal, your stress, and even your aging. Your nervous system is constantly listening to you.
The only question remaining is, what will your next breath tell it to do?